Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. So, guys, do you know about the giants of Lovelock? And this is Lovelock Cave. And this is yet another, and there are so many of these stories all across the world. All across the world. And every society, every corner of the globe, we have these legends of giants. So, Lovelock is located northeast of Reno in Nevada. And in 1911, two miners, David Pugh and James Hart, were hired to mine for bat guano from a cave that was going to be used as fertilizer. They removed a layer of guano estimated to be between 3 to 6 feet deep and weighing about 250 tons. And so the guano was dug up from the upper cave deposits, screened on the hillside outside the cave, and shipped to a fertilizer company in San Francisco. Miners had dumped the top layers of Lovelock into a heap outside of the cave. The miners were aware that there were artifacts in there, but only the most interesting specimens were saved. Unfortunately, the first exploration was unsystematic, and the loss of material and damage to the site strata was considerable in large portions of the cave. But they actually end up having an archaeological investigation back in 1912. And they actually pulled a lot of material out of there. Reportedly, roughly 10,000 different artifacts were pulled from this cave. That's a lot. And so it's pretty fascinating when we see this. Some of the artifacts were actually dated back to 10,000 years ago. So there's been a lot of use of this cave by different people. And the Native Americans have legends of this, of the Si-Te-Cah, which are a legendary tribe of red-haired giants that are cannibalistic. Very interesting as you see these sandals down on the bottom. Giant Lovelock sandals, nearly 2 feet in length, and the average man might have a 12-inch shoe going on. As you can see the jaw compared to a typical human jaw. There is a lot of evidence for the giants, and unfortunately what happens is things just disappear in so many cases. There were skulls that were found that had double rows of teeth and very large, and a body was actually found as well. And when you look at the legends of this whole area, like this body right here, this mummified remains was taken around Yosemite. So when we're talking about out here in the West where things can be preserved for a very, very long time, you could get some great artifacts. And it's actually similar conditions to what we see with Peru, where we have all the Paracas skulls. And of course, the mainstream is trying to put down the Paracas find as well, because this is what they do, and this is what they've done all along. The Smithsonian always comes along and the official channels and collects things, and then they just simply disappear. But yet we have all these photos, and we have more photos than just this one. And some people say, okay, well, these are just, these are guys out to make a buck. Come see the monster, that type of thing, And yeah, there are shysters out there, people that will do that, take advantage, charge people, maybe back in those days, a quarter to come take a look at a giant. So, you have to keep that in mind. But yet we have so many artifacts that were found, so many interesting things all across, the globe, really, and all the legends. And the Native American legends of these giants, it just goes right hand in hand with what we see that are, coming out of the Bible and coming out of other indigenous people's legends. So obviously there has to be some truth in it. And yes, we do have photos of the skulls and photos of bones and photos of things that just don't make sense, even when the originals go missing. So the northern Paiutes of Nevada have an ancient oral tradition that they pass down from generation to generation that usually causes the hearer to pause in bewilderment. The Paiutes state that long ago in ages past, they went to war against a ferocious enemy known as the Si-Te-Cah. Now, here is where this prehistoric tale becomes fascinating. According to the Paiutes, the Si-Te-Cah were a race of red-haired cannibalistic giants that would literally devour the flesh of their foes. The chronicle states that after 3 years of blood-weary battles, a coalition of regional tribes finally unified together to conquer this savage enemy. The allied tribes bravely pushed the Si-Te-Cah back into the depths of a very large cave and quickly covered the entrance with brush piles. A fire was then set ablaze that began to suffocate the giants, and any would-be escapees were quickly shot with a flurry of fire-piercing arrows. The giant cannibalistic carnivores finally met their grim fate in a blazing, cavernous inferno. So Si-Te-Cah is said to be translated as Tule-Eaters in the northern Paiute language. Tule is a species of water plant that grows in the marshes across North America and would have grown in Lake Honiton, a Pleistocene lake that once covered much of northwestern Nevada about 12,700 years ago. According to oral tradition, the giants used the Tule to weave rafts in which to navigate the lake, flee surprise attacks from the Paiutes, and worst of all, capture Paiute women who would gather Tule near the shore of Humboldt Lake, as we see a map over there. So the legend of the red-haired giants began to rapidly spread in 1883 when Sarah Winnemucca, daughter of Chief Winnemucca, wrote the first known autobiography by a Native American woman called Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims. In her book, she discusses a tribe of barbarians that she said that were known as the People-Eaters, who lived along the Humboldt River and who would waylay her people and eat them. She states the following in her memoirs. My people say the tribe we exterminated had reddish hair. I have some of their hair, which has been handed down from father to son. I have a dress which has been in our family a great many years, trimmed with this reddish hair. I'm going to wear it sometime when I lecture. It is called a mourning dress, for no one has such a dress but my family. Giant stature and red hair would obviously be considered genetic anomalies in the context of this account. So, to the skeptics who say the Si-Te-Cah were not actually giants, but just a tall enemy tribe, I ask the following questions. Why did the Si-Te-Cah have red hair and not black hair like the other indigenous tribes of the area? And why would one of the most influential Paiute families of the region save the red hair of their enemy and carefully pass it down from generation to generation, and then trim their most treasured garments with it if it was just hair from a normal human being? And over here, there's a video where you can actually see the cave, approximately 150 feet by 35 feet at its widest point. And there was, as we said, over 10,000 artifacts and specimens that were found there in the cave. Lots of things very, very interesting. Most definitely very, very interesting stuff, and preserved really well. And so one of the most interesting things is these duck decoys. They had 11 duck decoys that were found made of rush and Tule, and they were found painted and feathered. And they're considered to be some of the world's oldest and most elaborate ever discovered. And of course, the originals are now in the Smithsonian. Of course. The calendar, there was a donut-shaped stone with 365 notches carved along the outside and 52 corresponding notches along the inside. Some think it's a calendar. And of course, the sandals we looked at, there were weapons and arrow shafts, very large and heavy. And who would use a pestle this big? Mortar and pestle. How big would the person be that would be using a pestle this size? That's huge, and that's a giant pestle. Very interesting. And so you could see this giant pestle in a private back room at the Nevada State Museum, and there are skulls and stuff which are not on display, but they're being kept at the museum, and they say that they're not on official display because they don't know for sure the validity. They are what they are, but are they just trying to, again, keep the truth from us, or keep us from discovering the truth? And then there's this humanoid little being here. It's a photograph of what appears to be a childlike humanoid that had been mummified and wrapped in woven fur. And just look at the shape of the skull and the eyes. This is so similar to what has been found down in Peru again. This is really something that there's just an abundance And these are some of the skulls right here. And you can see the size of this one in particular. And it does have a double row of teeth, which is very interesting again. So, they constantly hide these things. There's probably, if we could see all the evidence that's ever been gathered, it would be just so overwhelming. So these beings were supposed to be anywhere from 7 feet to 10 feet tall. And unfortunately, some of the best specimens, were destroyed. But we even see right here, and there's so many of these ancient clippings. I've seen tons of these where, this one right here is from 1931. And, some even older, talking about these things that were found. A skeleton of a red-haired giant was found. Of course, they go missing as soon as the Smithsonian gets around. But do you know how many of these things have been found? Like I've told you guys that my fascination with all this began when I was about 11 or 12. So even back in those days, growing up in the 70s and doing all my studies in just books and things, I had found so many of these cases. And they found one here, 7'7" or 7'6", buried in a shroud covered with a dark substance. This one skeleton was recovered was figured to be about 9.5 or 10 feet tall. And then there was another one that was found that was supposed to be about 11 foot tall. As you see here, 8.5 foot in length. And it was described as having been wrapped in a gum-covered fabric similar to Egyptian mummies. And the other skeleton was nearly 10 feet long. You see this article from 1904 may be related to the Cardiff giant. Bones of a human skeleton 11 feet high are dug up in Nevada, Winnemucca. So, we see this appears to be real. And then there's the cover-up. It's pretty obvious. So why don't they want us to know the truth about these red-haired giants? Why don't they want us to know? What will it tell us? What will it tell us? And so you see here, the Humboldt Museum witnesses. There are a handful of people who have testified to seeing giant skulls from a Lovelock cave in a storage room at Humboldt Museum in Winnemucca, Nevada. Two of these witnesses are Don Monroe and M.K. Davis. And below are a series of statements made by M.K. Davis regarding their experiences. The Humboldt Museum in Winnemucca, Nevada used to keep a series of human skulls in a cabinet in the basement for private viewing. They have now repatriated the skulls, no longer have them. I saw them in 2006, photographed them in a cabinet. Don Monroe photographed them some 30-odd years ago, and they were different. Compare the photos, and you could not only see that some are missing, but there is an extraordinary mandible that was there in the prior photo missing from the later one. This mandible has had the teeth filed. Here is the photo that Don Monroe took 30 plus years ago. Pay attention to the fact that there are more artifacts then, and more particularly to the mandible, which is arrowed. So cover-ups after cover-ups, hiding the ancient history that they just don't want us to know. And I'll have all the links for you guys with this. And, this area, Nevada, in the American Southwest, we talked about, the Grand Canyon area and the legends, and we've talked about underground cities. There's so much going on. It's so rich. And of course, then we have the Bigfoot legends and the Sasquatch and so many other things going on. And then we have all the top secret military bases, underground as well. There's a reason for all this. There really is a reason. And, they're doing their best to keep it hidden. And so this is 10 strange facts concerning the red-haired giants of Lovelock Cave. You got the oral tradition, so you have this oral tradition of the Native Americans. And by the way, the DNA that was tested on these showed that they were Caucasian. And, so more closely related probably to the Ainu or to the Nordic races. So, our whole timelines are messed up. Official timelines completely. The history is completely hidden. So the Native Americans, they talk about these beings. You have the written account from 1883. You have the cave and the miners. You have all the artifacts that were pulled out. And then you have the archaeological excavations that went on. You got, incredibly sized tools. And so, you have archaeologists that basically validated the oral tradition of the Paiutes and the testimony of the miners. You got this strange little humanoid being that we've seen exact same things down in Peru. You got all the newspaper articles that were attesting to the fact that this was legitimate. And then you have more ancient mummies and giant skeletons in the area. And, dated back to 9,500 years ago, and some looking so similar to the Egyptian traditions. And then we have the testimony of people in Death Valley that fell through and discovered a huge, I wouldn't even call it a cave, but more of an underground city that had all sorts of Egyptian and Tibetan looking artifacts in it. All these things are kind of corroborating each other and proving the validity. And then you got the museum witnesses and the photographs and the testimony of the museum director and the cover-up. So, as we see here, it's a lot of evidence. A lot of evidence. Too much to just dismiss, my friends. So what are your thoughts? As always, I look forward to your comments. Like, share, subscribe, click the bell, get all the notifications. Thank you for helping the channel keep going. Obviously, what's going on with the censorship on YouTube, it's going to an all-new level and just trying to snuff out a lot of channels like this one. And if you just look at the official views, you will see that is a full-scale attack. It's a complete cover-up, just like the cover-up that has gone on with the red-haired giants. So my friends, as always, God bless and namaste.